Hello and welcome back to the European Parliament in Strasbourg for the second part of Talking Europe. My guest today is the outgoing president of this very assembly, Jerzy Buzek, a former Polish Prime Minister. Mr. Buzek will tell us more about his experience at the helm of the European Parliament. We'll also look at the results of last week's EU summit and at the results of the Polish presidency of the European Union. Mr. Buzek, thank you for having us here in Strasbourg in the European Parliament. And I'd like to start with last week's dramatic EU summit, which resulted in the adoption of a fiscal pact, which could be adopted by as many as 26 leaders. But Britain shocked the other countries by walking out from the table, saying we're not signing this. This is against the interests of the City of London, against the interest of Britain. Now, there were fierce debates. I could follow them this week in the European Parliament. What is your position on that?
Yeah, let me say, I regret Great Britain blocked the agreement on more European cooperation. And I think Great Britain is a very valuable member of the European Parliament and European Commission and the Council, and is helping very much in many other issues like single market, for example, and all the rules which are connected to a free market economy, and we like it in the European Union. So I would like to say, well, that I'm happy that the agreement was done between 26 member states, hopefully, and not between 27. And it was a third historic European summit, and I proposed the last one, but we don't know yet what will be the real and final outcome of that summit.
But has Britain acted in a selfish way, as many MEPs tend to believe?
Well, to defend the interest of the country and the citizens, it's quite obvious in the European Union. But sometimes I think that in some member states, or maybe governments, they don't believe that European Union is part of the solution, not part of the problem. Because we have our problems in the European Union, not because our integration, not even because of euro, but we haven't stick to the rules. And it is necessary to do it in the future. And what was the most important statement and conclusion of the summit? To strengthen our financial discipline, to make European Union and euro area more credible, because we lost the trust. So everybody should support such an issue. I think that also Great Britain should support such an important deal during the European Council meeting, strengthening our financial discipline.
Mr. Buzek, you said that this was a historic summit. You hope it's the last one. Indeed, the idea is to adopt a pact, a fiscal pact with tighter discipline and potentially sanctions. Now, this is all good on paper, but investors don't seem to be reassured.
Yeah, well, we need time. It always takes time because we must organize everything and to write it on the paper. And let me admit that European Parliament was asking for the financial discipline and automaticity of the sanctions for almost 1 year. And we wouldn't like to weaken our sanctions and probability of introducing sanctions. Now it is even a proposal to put it into the treaty. So it means European Parliament was right. And I am very proud that in 2.5 years I could help and change the situation of the European Parliament, we are a very strong institution, not only because of the Lisbon Treaty, but we were working on it. I was trying in each meeting, European Council, meetings with the presidents of European institutions, to think about that, to talk about that, because we are democratic representation of all the European citizens. If we want to have a democratic accountability in the European Union and to take strong decisions, we need support from the European Parliament. So I think it's quite a different situation than 2.5 years ago. We are really strong, influential institution.
And as you said, the only directly democratically elected body within the EU institutions. And yet some say that because this is an intra-governmental treaty, it could have been a trick by the big countries to sideline the EU institutions so that you hand back powers to the heads of states and governments. Are you worried?
I hope not. It will be not the case. We had such a similar examples, well, maybe not exactly the same. It was the Schengen Agreement. At the beginning was the intergovernmental agreement, was also some other maybe not so visible issues. So we can start from intergovernmental agreement, but we should go as quick as possible to within the European Union law and to use both community institutions, Commission and the Parliament, for democratic accountability and also for steering new regulations and new solutions. We can use for that Lisbon Treaty. There's a lot of space, free space, not used space for preparation of new legislation. And it is secondary legislation, could be very effective. So it is not necessary to change a treaty, by the opinion of the European Parliament and by myself as well. We can do a lot without any treaty changes.
A lot can be achieved from what was decided last week in Brussels.
I mean, I'm talking about more financial discipline and to make...
but for the sanctions, apparently, you would need a treaty change.
Well, yes, but we have it now in our secondary law, I mean a six-pack. And European Parliament was fighting for that. It is just, well, maybe not so strong as the primary law, but still it exists now, and some other legislative pieces are very similar to that. And Parliament was strong enough to convince all the European institutions to do such a deal.
There was, of course, much talk of the so-called Merkozy couple, France and Germany. Some say they've been trying to impose their views on their partners. We're going to watch our report there. For many, it's actually Germany under Angela Merkel that's the bad guy in all this. Some fear a rise of what has been called Germanophobia.
Angela Merkel as Adolf Hitler. The German Chancellor was depicted as her infamous predecessor in the Greek capital, just one of the protests against the austerity measures for which Germany is thought to be responsible.
Greeks
think that Berlin's exploiting the crisis and using the euro's weakness to transform sovereign states of Europe into provinces of the Fourth Reich.
Much of the public resentment at increasingly austere budgets across Europe is being directed at Germany and at Angela Merkel in particular. Her ally, MP Volker Kauder, has added fuel to the fire.
Suddenly, Europe is speaking German.
That statement was leapt upon by this Irish tabloid, fanning fears of German hegemony. And in France, criticism of its neighbour rose to new heights of stridency when socialist MP Arnaud Montebourg compared Merkel to the 19th century founder of the German Empire, Otto von Bismarck.
The question of German nationalism is re-emerging with Merkel's policies, which are like Bismarck's.
Has Germany become the scapegoat for Europeans in search of someone to blame for an increasingly stressful social and economic climate? It could be Merkel's style of leadership which is rubbing people the wrong way.
When one reads the foreign press, we see that it's not Germany as such that's being criticized or seen as a danger. It's much more what's perceived as the Chancellor's authoritative style.
If the rest of Europe is convinced that Germany is trying to impose its authority on the bloc, Germans fear the continent is deaf to the concerns of having to bail out their less wealthy neighbours.
Mr. Buzek, your reaction on this report. Some are saying Germany is trying to impose its views, but Germany has the wrong recipe. Austerity is not the solution because austerity will kill growth and make things even worse.
Of course, that austerity is not the complete solution because we need growth. Without growth, without our 2020 strategy, single market, investment in energy, green energy. We know all these issues, all the slogans which are so important for growth and creating jobs. For our citizens, the most important is creating jobs. They need jobs and competitiveness. But we must start from rebuilding credibility. And credibility means that we stick to our rules. It means there is no solidarity without responsibility. All the member states must be responsible from point of view of budgetary policy, national sovereign debt, budgetary deficit. That's our responsibility. Without such a responsibility, it's very difficult to say about avoiding the next crisis, for example. And we need also growth. It's quite obvious.
Both of them. Now, one last point about last week's summit. European leaders vowed to loan up to 200 billion euros to the IMF. Hopefully this money will or could return to Europe to help the Eurozone's ailing economies. 200 billion euros, that's a lot of money. Do you think we'll reach that target? And is Poland, your country, ready to contribute?
I think so. It should be decided how much for each country, because 26 together are ready to help. And I think it's a lot of money through International Monetary Fund. And we have also our European Stability Mechanism, which should start working in mid-2012, earlier than we have expected.
That's 500 billion
euro.
Yes.
So altogether, it's quite a solid firewall for the contingents.
Looking back at your term as President of the European Parliament, what is your best memory of working in this assembly?
Well, it's a great time. Was great time for me, and strengthening European Parliament. That was the most important for me. As I said a few minutes ago, not because of Lisbon Treaty, because it's natural, it's our law, but to show that we, as a democratic representation of all European citizens, we should influence all the decisions, and we also propose something like project for the future, New Deal for Europe. Especially now in crisis, it is much easier than in times of prosperity, because we were not prepared on the crisis. In the times of prosperity, we thought everything is working very well in the European Union, but no for the crisis. New Deal is very important, and European Parliament being so strong, after 2.5 years, I can say we changed the situation completely. My meeting with President Van Rompuy, President of the European Commission, and any other leaders was about involving European Parliament in decision-making process.
Now, this week, the European Parliament awarded the Sakharov Prize to 5 Arab activists. This is a way, of course, for your assembly to pay a tribute to the Arab revolutions. Meanwhile, though, many activists are still being killed in Syria. What will you do to help Syrian activists?
Well, probably, if we have possibility, something similar to no-fly zone, because the most important for Syrian people, I met quite a few of them, is to stop violation against the nation, against the citizens. It's very dangerous for them. And now it is very difficult, we know very well. We were successful in Libya. I visited Libya a few days after liberalization. And I must say that this moment was incredible for me, especially important at Martyrs Square. Is something similar like Tahrir Square. People were saying, thanks you, Europe. Thanks for your support. Thank you for believing in us. It's very important. We should meet their expectations and help them. So Arab Spring is important for European Union. They are our neighbors. We should support and help them.
Mr. Buzek, one last question very briefly. Mr. Sakharov is, of course, a Russian icon. Now, in Russia, the elections didn't happen the way the authorities wanted, or apparently some vote rigging was revealed. What do you say about this? As a former Polish Prime Minister, what message do you have to the Russian authorities?
Well, it's quite obvious. We were not invited as European Parliament as observers. It's unusual. The second such a similar country in Europe is Belarus. So we can say Russia and Belarus not inviting such observers as European Parliament. All the others are inviting each time. It's very important. And we can say that independent international organizations said the election was unfair and not transparent enough. We can only support such a point of view.
Are you calling for new elections?
And I think everything is in the hands of Russian people. We need strong civil society. We need people who like to change the situation in Russia. And it was the same in Central Eastern Europe. You can call for new election or during Orange Revolution. What was the most important? Calling for new election from the outside of Ukraine wouldn't be so important as 1 million citizens staying at the independent square in Kiev for 10 days.
Jerzy Buzek, outgoing President of the European Parliament, thank you very much for talking to us. And thank you for watching this edition of Talking Europe on France 24. Please stay tuned on our channel for more news. Goodbye.